think I'm going to play the same game that Paula played today. If Bill were going to talk about a certain author that he might quote very frequently, might you know who that might be? Who is it? Richard Rohr, very good. And if you know me, you know that I am a big fan of Catholic priest, thinker, and prophet Richard Rohr. And Rohr has been for me, I have to tell you, a mentor, someone who has opened my eyes, challenged my thinking, and caused me to love even more the faith that has always been a part of my life. Now, an insight from Rohr that has really affected my thinking, and we talked about it in Faith Formation today. And so, by the way, if you were there, this doesn't mean you don't have to listen now, all right? You need to still listen. But that insight from Rohr was that what he calls the wisdom pattern, the notion that in faith and life, both are a matter of order, disorder, and reordering. Rohr thinks that this is the pattern of life itself. Even creation participates in it. And we see it in the seasons of the church year, the stories of Scripture, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, the rise and fall of civilizations, our own lives, order, disorder, and reorder. I couldn't help but think about this pattern as I confronted our first reading from Acts today. The story tells us about one of the great struggles of the early church. The struggle over who is welcome and what do people have to do in order to be welcome. It was, and by the way, this is a story that is always being, or struggle that's always being lived out in the church and the world. And this is the struggle between us and them. And the struggle came to a head because of a vision that Peter had. And you got to get this, Peter was a part of the order crowd. He was a part of the crowd that had learned the order quite well. He had learned his faith well, and gosh darn it, it served him very well. He had been a Jew, became a Christian Jew, and he was convinced that new converts to the Christian movement needed to do the same things that he did when he became a part of the club. In other words, if you're going to become a Christian, you need to become a Jew first. That's what happened to Peter. He was a Jew first, which meant you needed to be circumcised. And women, I'm sorry, they didn't care about you in those days. You're not included in this conversation. Well, you really are. And then you also needed to submit yourself to the food laws that Jews practiced. And you know, that seemed like a good order. And frankly, it was a good order. And it worked for Peter. It worked very well for Peter. And it should work for other people too. But here's the problem. What do you do when the folks who are desiring to participate in your faith come from different cultures than yours? After all, how much of your religious practice is really cultural practice? And I got to tell you, we Lutherans struggle with this. Some of us forget that reserved worship, green and red Jell-O salads, the inability to clap on the upbeat, and potlucks are not essential to the faith. They are cultural matters. But what are cultural matters and what are not? Are there some non-negotiables? And what are they? Circumcision and food laws? I mean, they seem like a necessary part of the order, especially since the Holy Bible tells you so. How far does inclusion need to go? And these are some of the issues, and let's be honest. Let's be very honest. I want you to hear this from me. Order is a very good thing. I think most people would tell you that most of us do better when we start in order, when we know what is expected of us. Children, for example, need order. They may tell you otherwise, but they do better when they have order. And I got to say, too many folks these days lack some sense of order. They lack patterns. In some ways, it seems that life for many of us is just one individual choice after another. We don't fit into any patterns. We just choose our way into the future as if life were one giant mire aisle with 174 options for toothpaste. Life defined as individual consumer choice, which is what is happening so often in our culture, truthfully can be quite chaotic and burdensome and overwhelming. And I know I've said this before, but when I go to Meijer's and I go down the aisle, I get anxious because I don't know which kind of toothpaste to choose. 177 options are just entirely too many for my little brain to handle. In my work as a pastor, I've heard countless parents tell me that they don't want to expose their kids to a particular religion, a particular form of religion, because, well, they want them to choose for themselves. Come on! If you don't give kids something, they won't have something to build on or to rebel against. They need some patterns. It is good for them to show up at church week after week, even if they don't want to. It's good for them to learn the basics. It's good for them to have a tradition that can help shape them for the rest of their lives. It's good for them to realize that they can rebel against that tradition. But we start life better when we start in order. But some of you are saying, well, that's good. I'm liking that. I'm feeling really good. But I got to tell you this. Order's a good starting place, but it's not to be the place where you are meant to take up residence. Look what happened to Peter. God messed with his little order. Through a vision, God spoke to Peter about that order. Through a vision, God disordered his little settled world. Truthfully, we don't move into disorder on the basis of our own volition or will too often. We generally like our little ordered universes, which is why we tend to hang out with people who think like us. Our politics, our religion, our approaches to living, they are pretty settled realities. And it frequently takes something outside of ourselves to change our minds. Something like, an educational experience. Something like, I hope, a preached word. An encounter, maybe with someone even close to home. When someone in your household or among your friends ends up being gay, all of a sudden you have to take a second look at your little settled universe. Peter's experience of disorder came through a divine vision, which I think is the Bible's way of recognizing that very often we don't go into disorder without a little push. Most of us do not raise our hands and say, please change me. I know that I am terribly self-centered. Please change me. I know that I live with a little worldview. Please change me. Doesn't normally work that way. Rohr argues that sometimes for change to take place, we must go through what he calls necessary suffering. When Peter in his vision is told that he should get up, kill, and eat all kinds of animals that he was taught not to eat, especially by the Bible, he says, don't you even think about going there. I have never eaten those things. Not eating them has been a part of my identity. I am Peter who doesn't eat ham sandwiches. It's a part of the order that I've known. It has served me and my people very well. I am Dutch Reformed. I don't mow my lawn on Sunday. And so I say, what's wrong with a good identity marker? I think there's something good about identity markers. But God is in the business of unsettling and disorder, so much so that Peter must have this vision 3 times. I told you once. I told you twice. And now I'm telling you a 3rd time. We're all a little slow. Peter, you can eat ham sandwiches. What God has called clean, made clean, you must not call profane. And actually, Peter, you can eat any animal that you want, even if the Bible told you that you shouldn't. And most importantly, Peter, you can eat with anyone, especially Gentiles. And here is the crux of the matter in the text. Gentiles are welcome, and they don't have to do things the way you do them in order to be welcome. I mean, if they and you don't want to eat ham sandwiches, that's fine. I mean, after all, ham has entirely too much sodium in it, so it's probably not a bad idea to give up ham sandwiches. But the connection to the community of foreigners is not based on them not eating pork. Your relationship to them is not dependent upon them becoming like you. The Spirit of God moves upon them as much as the Spirit moves upon you, and this Spirit brings a new day. Now, I must tell you that the people who have been a part of your little club will not always be understanding when you start hanging out with the Gentiles. They won't. Peter's fellow club members criticized him when he started hanging out with them. They asked him pointedly, "Why do you eat with circumcised men? Shame on you. We don't hang around with such people." Your friends may criticize you when you make new friends. Disorder isn't always easy, and sometimes, I have to admit, it can be some of the hardest work we'll ever do. It isn't easy getting over your little political opinions. It isn't easy getting over your notions about life and people. I'm going to be honest here, one of the hardest things in my life has been realizing that every time I think I have life figured out, men and women figured out, poverty figured out, politics figured out, I discovered that I don't have them figured out. Every conclusion I have reached has needed to be changed or nuanced. It ain't easy getting over yourself. It ain't easy dying to yourself. But this is what it means to follow Jesus. In fact, this is just the way life is. Life brings disorder to our every attempt to nail down order. It disorders our little, neat religious boxes. It may even turn our politics upside down. It may disrupt the dreams we have for our families. Order, then disorder, life, then death. Got to tell you, though, the story doesn't end there. Something, by the way, the resurrection of Jesus reveals. It doesn't all end in death. We who follow Jesus, we who participate in the way life is, no disorder can indeed be transformed into a new order. There's new life that can emerge, and does emerge out of disorder. And Peter is anticipating that new life in our text for today. He says, if God gave the same gift to them he gave us when we believed in the Lord, who was I that I could hinder God? If God is in the business of creating a new order, why should I get in the way? Why shouldn't I sit down with people I was told before I couldn't sit down and eat with? If God is out in front of me creating a whole new community, why shouldn't I be participating in that much bigger community? Why should my little world become much bigger? There's new life that emerges out of disorder. And while I know that there's much grieving that goes on when our worlds are challenged or changed, let me assure you this, the story isn't over. And sometimes, this takes a long time to probably grasp, sometimes this new order is much more fascinating and often much more real, much more authentic than that old order. Those who would experience their family lives not becoming what they dreamed of often become much more understanding of others whose lives are equally messy. There is deep communion and intimacy, new life that emerges out of shared pain. You know, I am struck by the way the Bible ends its story, which we experienced in our reading from Revelation today. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The final act of God, according to Revelation, is God reordering not just your life or my life or the church's life, but everything. The end is a new order for everything. If that is so, we live now realizing that our little ordered worlds are quite small, that our disordered lives are normal and necessary, but not final. The final truth rests in the hands of God, who indeed will make all things new. You know, there's a famous line that says, "It ain't over till it's over." Well, it ain't over until God speaks the final reordering word. Amen.